In 1962, the highest-ranking generals in the United States military drafted a secret plan to stage terrorist attacks against American citizens. They proposed blowing up ships, hijacking airplanes, planting bombs in U.S. cities, and blaming it all on Cuba. Not to repel a threat, not in response to an attack, but to manufacture one. This was Operation Northwoods, a plan our leaders hoped you would never see. But now, you're going to. To understand Operation Northwoods, you have to understand the mood of America in the early 1960s. The Soviet Union had just placed nuclear missiles in Cuba, 90 miles from Florida. The Cold War wasn't abstract anymore. It felt like the U.S. was one bad decision away from nuclear annihilation. The U.S. had already tried to overthrow Fidel Castro. That attempt, the Bay of Pigs invasion of 1961, was led covertly by the CIA. It failed disastrously. The U.S. military was humiliated. Inside the Pentagon, resentment grew. Many commanders believed President John F. Kennedy was weak on communism, and that he was unwilling to use the full force of American power. They believed they knew better, and they wanted a second chance to invade Cuba. But there was a problem. The American public did not want another war. So the Pentagon proposed a horrifying solution: create a crisis so severe, so emotional, so outrageous, that the public would demand war. On March 13, 1962, the Joint Chiefs of Staff, the top U.S. military leadership, approved a memo outlining staged attacks to be blamed on Cuba. The memo included detailed, step-by-step plans. Not rumors, not speculation. Plans. The document suggests exploding a U.S. ship near Havana and telling the press Cuba did it. Staging attacks on U.S. military bases using Cuban-supplied weapons, planted by the U.S. recruiting Cuban refugees to be blamed for bombings in Miami. Faking the crash of a civilian airliner. It proposed switching a real plane with a remote-controlled drone, then blowing up the drone mid-flight and broadcasting it worldwide. The memo states plainly, a carefully staged incident could be arranged to make it appear that Cuban forces have attacked a U.S. aircraft, and casualty lists in U.S. newspapers would cause a helpful wave of national indignation. In other words, dead Americans. Public demand for war. This wasn't about defense. This was about manipulation. So who signed off on this? General Lyman Lemnitzer, chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, the highest-ranking military officer in the United States. Lemnitzer had already been involved in clandestine operations with the CIA, including assassination plots against foreign leaders. The Pentagon and the CIA at this time were operating with almost no oversight. Even Congress had limited visibility. Inside Washington, the belief had formed that the ends justified the means. If deceiving the American public meant saving the free world, then deception wasn't a crime, it was a duty. This mindset wasn't isolated. It matched the logic behind MK-ULTRA, COINTELPRO, and Operation Mongoose. Programs where citizens were experimented on without consent, activists were surveilled and targeted, foreign governments were overthrown covertly. For many in power, morality had become flexible. Secrecy had become routine. And the public? The public was a tool to be shaped. But when Operation Northwoods reached the Oval Office, Kennedy didn't hesitate. He refused. Not only refused, he was outraged. Kennedy believed that America should be a model for democracy, not deception. And just months later, he removed General Lemnitzer from his position. This decision drove a deeper wedge between Kennedy and the security establishment. Some military leaders began to believe Kennedy was an obstacle, a president who stood in the way of America's global destiny. And it is here, in this moment, that the relationship between the president and the military fractured permanently. For decades, the plan remained classified, hidden from Congress, hidden from the public, hidden from history. Until 1997, when researchers with the Assassination Records Review Board released the documents. And everything changed. Because now we had proof. Proof that U.S. military leaders had seriously planned false flag terrorism on American citizens. Not in theory. In writing, in detail. Signed. Operation Northwoods was never carried out. But the mindset that produced it? That is something we still live with. If leaders were willing to manufacture consent once, If deception was seen as a tool of statecraft, then we must ask ourselves, what else has been hidden? And how would we know if it happened again? This is not conspiracy. This is history. Documented, preserved, and now revealed. If you enjoyed this bite-sized bit of history, like, share, and subscribe for more History Bites.